Hey everybody, I'm JC with Teen Truth. Very honored to be here with you today. You're either hearing us out on social media, out on YouTube, or maybe even on the podcast today. I have a really great guest for us that I'm hoping can give us a ton of insight working with students and just helping students be resilient, helping them overcome adversity. Mr. Emil Harker is here. He is a counselor and therapist just like me, but he does a ton of great work with kids and has a lot of great energy and ideas. So I'm excited for everything he has to offer you today. Emil, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background.
You bet. So my specialty is in high conflict. I grew up with 8 brothers, okay? That means 9 boys. We didn't talk things out, okay? We did things that were probably inappropriate to deal with problems. So as an adult, I had to really figure some stuff out so that I didn't get in trouble all the time. And as a new therapist, I realized, and as a husband, I realized I had to do some different ways of communicating. And in my desperate attempt to find ways that really worked, I created a program of being able to deal with conflict, and not in a way that is kind of smug or, I win the argument, but in a way that actually strengthens a relationship. Yeah. And so that's the power of this, of conflict, and using it in a way that creates connection rather than like destruction.
Yeah, I mean, I've been reading your book. He was kind enough to send me a copy of the book. It's You Can Turn Conflict into Closeness. It was written primarily for successful marriages, but I think like anybody living in any relationship could definitely read this book and get some value of it. And one of the things that you really highlighted at the beginning of the book, which I think is so true, not only in marriage, but for us, this call today, just so you know, is really for educators and principals and counselors who might be watching this. Really even working with students. And one of the things I thought that really rang true in the beginning of the book is just this idea of good intent. Right. And I really believe that we all as humans, like we want to do well, we want to succeed. Of course, there's all different various obstacles and things that kind of come in the way. But could you talk a little about that? Like just this concept of good intent as it relates to conflict in relationships?
Well, the main source of conflict comes when we become offended. When we are like, if I'm a teacher, I'm feeling disrespected right now. Someone is being rude or disrespectful, and I'm feeling that kind of tightness. Or anything that can happen that frustrates me, disappoints, hurts my feelings. The reason why I'm being hurt is because there's a story that I'm telling myself rather quickly that explains the behavior of the other person. And the part of our brain about self-preservation and safety reacts quicker to any interpretation of a behavior that's a threat to us, way more than an opportunity for growth. So the initial impulse is to become defensive and aggressive, and some people shut down and pull away. But if we're defensive, we become argumentative, we become hostile, and that sabotages the relationship. So assuming good intent is a step-by-step process to override the natural impulse to become defensive. And if we can start to see that the intentions of the behavior, not the behavior itself, but the motivations of their behavior actually have good purpose. When we see that good intention, then we can respond without being so emotionally reactive. And then we can handle the behavior that may be ineffective or inappropriate without it becoming contentious or argumentative. So that's what assuming good intent is all about.
Yeah. And so when you think of your work with teens, and maybe give us a little bit of background into your work. I know you've worked in a lot of treatment centers. You've done a ton of work with teens. Like, how do you see that play out in the relationships with them? So when we are able to do exactly what you just said, if the teacher is able to kind of pull back and see that, like, what does it do in the work with the teenager?
Okay, so first is I've got to see them differently, not as a hostile person. So let's say I've got a teenager who is being really aggressive, all right? Now, when they're being aggressive and they're coming across like either mean or hurtful or something, we have to realize that the behavior is trying to compensate for something that they need on the inside. So instead of going into a power struggle with them saying, look, That kind of behavior will not be tolerated in this classroom, young man. You better sit down and shut your mouth or you're going to. If you get compliance, they're going to retaliate. Okay. So instead of being hostile back to them, go to the underlying, what's going on inside of them. So if they're being hostile or aggressive or something like that, imagine if you, and even with this little sense of humor, we can go right to the root and say, hey, Tommy, I'll bet you deep inside, you probably just need a hug. Someone need to give him a hug. Who wants to give Tommy a hug? Because this meanness, that's not you, Tommy. There's something going on. What's going on inside of you? No, I'm a jerk and I'm mean. Oh, come now, Tommy. I know you. Deep inside, there's probably something really come talk to me for a second. And it's like, there's always a root to that aggression. People aren't naturally aggressive. Okay. Mm-hmm. They're compensating. Naturally, we want to connect. That's driven. It's primal into us. But when we don't feel safe, or we got too much stress, or I've got internal conflict and I don't want to be vulnerable, I compensate by being aggressive. And that's with anybody.
And Emil, so jump on that word though, vulnerable right there. So a lot of our work in schools, we talk about telling our truth, and that's what teen truth is really about. And, we're driving at the whole time. Right. But as we know in our work, and from your work and educators listening, students struggle so much during their teenage years with being vulnerable for many reasons, right? Like what do other kids on campus think? Like just so many things going on. So like, how do you, I love what you're saying, like in the moment then, so that how do you like build a relationship or kind of like convince the child that like there's value in the vulnerability? Like, how do you get to those next steps with them to allow that real relationship to take place?
Doing it cerebrally, like explaining it to them, probably won't be effective, because remember, their brains are not processing things in a sophisticated way like we are. They're still trying to learn how to make those connections in a philosophical way. So what's going to happen is when they feel the connection of our care, that's going to give them all the proof that they need to then refer back to and say, that thingy where you open up to me, that's vulnerability. That's got magic to it. Mm-hmm. But if I say, hey, vulnerability is really important. And so when you're really sad and you're frustrated and you feel like I feel like a failure. I humiliated myself. I was at track and I was supposed to perform well, and my friends were there, and I choked.
Yeah.
And they're sad and they're frustrated. But when they're disappointed with themselves, okay, and they feel like a failure, how do they act? Okay.
Angry. Yeah.
Right. They're angry. It's coming out as anger and hostility. And if people respond to anger and hostility, hey, that kind of behavior, that's not going to work here. You change your attitude, young man. That's not going to support their vulnerability. But when we connect with it, hey, I can see this really frustrated, disappointed. You know what? You probably don't want to talk about it right now, but I got your back. I know that you were hoping to do well, and here you don't do your best. And I don't want to tell you great job, because you're not going to believe it anyway, but I appreciate you showing up and trying, but right now you probably don't care what I'm going to say to you. I love you. I got your back. And when you want to talk, let's talk.
Yeah.
And then they're like, yeah, and then once they begin talking, if you get them to talk, congratulations, you should win something. But if you get them to talk, this is where you can really start to make it easy for them. Oftentimes as parents and teachers, we want to save them from the discomfort. Mm-hmm. And we want to give a solution or good advice, hey, so maybe next time you ought to try. No. That's not helping culture vulnerability. In the vulnerabilities where we get the connection. When we get the connection, then we get the correction. So if they start to talk, all we have to do, it's like playing emotional whack-a-mole, all right? As soon as they begin to talk, all we want to do is identify the emotion that they're expressing, label it, and connect it to their experience. Because they may not know, right now, I feel humiliated, embarrassed, and ashamed, and also disappointed with myself, they're not going to sort through the ingredients of the casserole. They're just going to go, I feel bad. I don't want to talk. But if they start to open up and go, oh, I can see how, scary that is, or embarrassing that might be, especially since you were really hyping yourself up, or whatever it was, the story. Yeah. By listening to them, we're psychologically modeling how to communicate.
Yeah. What I really hear you saying is like, we need to work to kind of understand their underlying relational need. And maybe it's comfort, maybe it's attention, maybe it's affection even in those moments. But like by giving them the space, we kind of allow that magic to happen a little bit. And I think it's really powerful. And I love the examples you gave too, because I'm sure for teachers and principals, things get moving so fast in the classroom or on campus. To just slow ourselves down and think about how we respond is what really allows for that deeper emotional connection and that relational need to get met. I want
to just jump in. If a teacher or anyone sees any kind of aggression or hostility, we should immediately see that as vulnerability that's constipated. Mm-hmm. We can address, not react to the anger, but address the underlying issue. You become like a Jedi mind warrior.
There you go. I love it. We should all be Jedi mind warriors across campus. It would just be amazing. So one thing, maybe just to switch gears, it's kind of related to what we're talking about, but I was really interested in asking you about today. I really have come to believe that resiliency is a huge component to mental health, and just like kids building the self-efficacy and knowledge that they can overcome challenges. And I think so often in our schools, as well as in our homes, we are afraid to let kids struggle a little bit. When you and I were growing up, we had helicopter parents, and now we got these lawnmower parents and these bulldozer parents and these, I heard one the other day, it was like a snowplow parent or something. Like I said, we have these people out there that want to mow down all the problems in front of kids. They're cheating. They're literally cheating to get their kids into college, right? They don't want their kids to go through rejection and failure. And I'm not saying that every educator is doing that, but I do feel sometimes as teachers, like we don't want that struggle to happen either. And what I've found as a counselor really is that there's a ton of beauty in the struggle, and that is where like the resiliency is really built. So I was wondering if you could, because you've been in so deep with so many kids. Right. I mean, I get to jump around from school to school and I kind of stay on the top level of things, but with your work that you've done with kids in treatment centers and just working with so many parents, like you've been able to go deep, like what are some of the things that we can do to, like, A, what do you think the value of the struggle is? And B, what are things that we can do to like get value out of that struggle for our kids?
So you mentioned that there is inherent value in the difficulty. I tell my parents that are working with these teens that their discomfort is the medicine that helps them grow. If we save them from discomfort, we are doing a huge disservice to them. So one of the elements is instead of being the parent, take the role as a consultant. And the consultant's role is to be less invested in the success of your client, okay, your student or your son or daughter, be less invested than they are. If we become so devoted to the outcome, okay, that we start to control or manage or manipulate or force or compel, then we don't teach resilience. We don't teach independence. We don't teach autonomy. We don't foster that. And then when stress happens in life, they're going to crumble. And so as a consultant, as soon as they're a teenager, as soon as they start pushing back, that's when you should get the graduation ceremony of your parenting is done. You now become a consultant. And as a consultant, it isn't your mission that's a priority. It's theirs. And I promise you this, the priorities and mission of the goals of your kid are in alignment with yours. Their strategies may not be, but what do they want? They want freedom. They want autonomy. They want success. They want comfort. Sound like a good parenting idea too, right? You want your kids to be confident and ability to succeed. So then it's a matter of being a consultant to help them realize which strategies are the most helpful to them, not by telling them. Why? Because they're not going to process it. They need to figure some of these things out on their own. And so what you do is you help in a kind of Montessorian way, get them close to that moment when they have to make a decision one way or the other. And we maximize our influence as a consultant by making their desires our number one goal. If our desires become our goal, then it gives them reason to be defiant as a desperate attempt to feel independent. Our ability to help them identify what they ultimately want, which is what we want, it makes it so we take the pressure off ourselves. And we don't have to be micromanaging. We just have to help them identify what they want. And that's hard for them sometimes. But as that consultant, they want to do well in school, or at least have the teachers off their back or the parents off their back, right? So, well, what do we need to do that? Okay, well, how should you do that? Okay, will that work? Okay, if that doesn't work, what else would you do? Yeah. That's what a consultant does. And so that's the power of a consultant role rather than a parent role. But it's really difficult to let go of your outcome. But if you want a kid who's successful and independent and autonomous, the sooner you move into the consultant role, the better it's going to be for everybody.
Yeah, that's just gold right there. And one of the strategies I use is I like to use the word wonder. I think your word wonder is a very kind of non-confrontational word. And you can just ask the kid, like, hey, like you just said, like, I wonder how you're going to get through that. Or I wonder how you've gotten through that in the past. It's just a very kind of non-confrontational way to switch that from problem focused to really solution focused. And so, Emil, it was great to sit with you today and just learn all this great insight. I'm sure the educators, parents, and administrators listening right now are just taking notes down. Is there any website or somewhere we can go to connect with you? Like, what's the best way for someone to reach out to you?
You bet. I think the easiest way is to go to rtcparents.com. I created an online program to help parents work through situations that are really tough with a kid who's got mental health issues and behavioral health issues that are really defiant. And so I've got a program for that. And it's easy for people to find me just by going to rtcparents.com.
Sounds good. Check it out. It's a great program. And for those of you stopping by, we appreciate it. We hope you found value, insight, and inspiration here. You can find us out at teentruth.net, of course, or out on social media. Y'all take care. You have a great day.